You know that person, the one who keeps everyone at arm's length, who guards their heart like it's a vault nobody's supposed to crack, who seems almost allergic to letting anyone see them vulnerable, the one who insists they're not really the relationship type, yet somehow can't quite manage to stay away from you either. They send mixed signals that leave you constantly questioning where you stand. One moment they seem warm, attentive, and deeply connected. The next, they disappear behind emotional walls so thick that reaching them feels impossible. They tell you they need space, yet they notice when you're no longer around. They avoid emotional conversations, yet they quietly remember the smallest details about you months later. To anyone trying to make sense of this behavior, it can feel like standing in front of two completely different people. One version reaches toward connection, the other retreats from it. You begin wondering whether either version is real. Did they genuinely care, or were you imagining the closeness? Were their affectionate moments authentic, or simply temporary? Why would someone move closer only to pull away again when things start feeling meaningful? These questions have frustrated partners, psychologists, and relationship experts for decades because the behavior appears contradictory on the surface. But contradictions often make perfect sense once you understand the emotional system operating underneath them. Here's something most people never really grasp about avoidant attachment. It isn't simply a fear of commitment, it isn't simply a dislike of relationships, and it certainly isn't proof that someone lacks emotions. At its core, avoidant attachment is often a conflict between two equally powerful human needs: the need for connection and the need for emotional safety. Most people assume these two needs naturally support one another. For securely attached individuals, they often do. Emotional closeness feels comforting, dependence feels natural, vulnerability strengthens trust. But for someone with avoidant attachment, those same experiences can activate an entirely different emotional response. Closeness doesn't just represent love, it also represents risk. The closer someone gets, the more emotionally exposed they become. The more emotionally exposed they become, the more vulnerable they feel to disappointment, rejection, criticism, or loss of independence. Their nervous system doesn't consciously separate present relationships from earlier emotional experiences. Instead, it often treats intimacy itself as something that requires caution. This pattern usually develops long before adulthood. Many avoidant individuals grew up in environments where emotional needs were minimized, dismissed, or inconsistently acknowledged. Perhaps caregivers valued achievement over emotional expression. Maybe affection was unpredictable. Maybe vulnerability was met with criticism, discomfort, or emotional distance. Children naturally adapt to whatever environment helps them survive. If expressing sadness repeatedly leads nowhere, they stop expressing sadness. If asking for comfort consistently results in disappointment, they stop asking for comfort. If emotional dependence feels unreliable, they begin relying on themselves instead. Over time, self-sufficiency becomes more than a personality trait. It becomes a survival strategy. As adults, this strategy often looks like confidence. They appear independent, capable, calm under pressure. They solve problems alone. They rarely ask for help. They seem perfectly comfortable handling life without leaning on anyone. People admire these qualities because independence is often celebrated. But what appears to be confidence on the outside sometimes hides emotional protection on the inside. The avoidant person isn't always avoiding people. They're often avoiding the uncomfortable vulnerability that genuine closeness requires. That distinction matters because it explains why they sometimes behave in ways that confuse everyone around them. They may genuinely enjoy spending time with you. They may think about you constantly. They may admire your kindness, intelligence, humor, and emotional warmth. Yet, as the relationship deepens, another process quietly begins unfolding beneath their awareness. Their nervous system starts noticing increasing emotional dependence. Your opinion begins mattering more. Your absence becomes more noticeable. The possibility of losing you becomes more real. Ironically, these are often signs that the relationship is becoming emotionally significant, but instead of feeling excitement alone, they also begin experiencing anxiety, not necessarily because of anything you've done, because emotional investment now carries emotional risk. That is when many avoidant individuals instinctively create distance. Sometimes they become busier, sometimes they immerse themselves in work, sometimes they communicate less, sometimes they convince themselves they need more freedom, sometimes they begin focusing on small imperfections in the relationship that never seemed important before. Psychologists often describe these as deactivating strategies. They help reduce feelings of emotional vulnerability by shifting attention away from closeness. Rather than consciously deciding to disconnect, the mind quietly creates emotional space because distance feels safer than exposure. To the partner, however, this behavior can feel deeply personal. You wonder if you said something wrong, if you asked for too much, if they stopped loving you, if someone else entered the picture. You search for explanations because sudden emotional distance rarely feels random. In reality, the explanation is often more internal than external. The avoidant person's struggle is not always with you. It is with what intimacy awakens inside them. That doesn't mean every avoidant relationship is healthy or that every withdrawal should be tolerated indefinitely. Emotional distance can still cause real pain, regardless of the reasons behind it. Understanding the pattern should create compassion, not excuses. What makes avoidant attachment particularly confusing is that genuine affection and emotional withdrawal can exist simultaneously. They can miss you while avoiding your calls. They can love you while struggling to express it consistently. They can crave connection while fearing the vulnerability that connection demands. Those emotional contradictions are difficult for others to understand because most people expect feelings and behavior to move in the same direction. For avoidant individuals, they often move in opposite directions. The stronger the attachment becomes, the stronger the instinct to protect themselves may become as well. That is why their actions sometimes seem to contradict their emotions. It isn't always because the feelings are fake. Sometimes the protective system is simply louder than the feelings themselves. And until that protective system is understood and gradually healed, every meaningful relationship can begin to feel like standing at the edge of two different worlds. One world quietly whispers, "Move closer. This person feels safe." The other whispers even louder, "Be careful. If you let them matter too much, you might lose yourself." That silent tug-of-war is the hidden reality behind avoidant attachment. It is not a life without love. It is often a life where love and self-protection compete for the same space. And until those two forces stop feeling like enemies, the avoidant person may continue doing the very thing that confuses everyone around them most, reaching for connection with one hand while pushing it away with the other. These individuals don't express love the way you'd naturally expect them to. You won't get sweeping declarations or poetic confessions of feeling from them. Instead, they speak an entirely different language, one built out of contradictions, subtle shifts in behavior, and guarded little admissions that most people completely overlook. Today, we're going to decode that hidden language together, because when someone with avoidant attachment says certain specific things to you, they're not just filling silence with small talk. They're quietly letting you step inside a fortress they've spent their entire life constructing, brick by brick. And once you understand what to actually listen for, you'll realize they may already be in love with you, even if they'd never say those exact words. Let's break down 6 specific phrases that reveal what's really going on beneath an avoidant person's surface, what these words genuinely mean underneath, and why, for them, these phrases function as their own private version of saying "I love you." Let's begin with the first one, because it's genuinely massive and it's often completely misread by people who don't recognize the psychological weight riding underneath it. When someone with avoidant attachment tells you, "I'm not really a people person, but you're different," they're not just tossing you a casual compliment or trying to make you feel special in passing conversation. They're handing you a key to a world they've carefully built to keep everyone else locked out. See, avoidant individuals construct their entire sense of identity around self-sufficiency and emotional independence. There's a narrative constantly playing in their head that sounds something like this: "I don't need anyone. People are unpredictable. People disappoint. People are ultimately unreliable. This isn't arrogance, and it isn't some antisocial streak. It's a deeply wired defense mechanism, usually forged way back in childhood, often stemming from inconsistent caregiving, emotional neglect, or early experiences where being vulnerable led straight to pain and disappointment. So when they tell you that you're different, what they're actually communicating beneath the surface is this: you've managed to do something I genuinely believed was impossible. You've made me question everything I thought I understood about relationships and human connection. That's not some throwaway observation. That's seismic. That's genuinely earth-shattering for someone who has spent years, maybe even decades, perfecting the art of emotional distance. They're quietly admitting that the walls they've built, specifically designed to keep everyone at arm's length and protect the vulnerable core underneath, simply aren't holding up against you. Somehow, you slip through the cracks. You found a way past defenses they didn't even realize could be breached. And for someone who has spent their entire life turning emotional unavailability into a survival skill, that realization is simultaneously terrifying and thrilling. This phrase is their way of quietly acknowledging they're feeling something they've spent their whole life actively running from: real connection, genuine intimacy, authentic emotional engagement. They're not going to say, "I'm falling for you," or "I think I love you," because those words demand too much exposure, too much risk. Those phrases require admitting a level of need and dependence that their entire attachment system was built to avoid at all costs. But telling you that you're different, that's as close as they can safely get to admitting they're already there, already feeling things more intensely and more deeply than they ever intended to allow themselves to feel. Pay very close attention when you hear this next phrase, because what follows it tends to reveal absolutely everything about what's happening underneath the surface. When someone with avoidant attachment says, "I don't usually talk about this stuff," they're essentially waving a massive flag signaling that something significant is unfolding in that moment. Avoidant people are true masters of surface-level conversation and social interaction. They can charm you, entertain you, engage with you, connect with you on countless levels, all without ever revealing anything authentically real or genuinely vulnerable about who they actually are underneath. It's a finely tuned survival strategy they've sharpened over years of repeated practice. Keep people entertained, but keep them emotionally at a safe distance. Keep every interaction light. Keep it manageable. Keep it controllable. They'll happily talk about sports, work, current events, hobbies, shared interests, even their opinions and ideas on countless topics, but they'll skillfully steer around anything that touches their actual emotional core. So when they preface something by saying, "I don't usually talk about this," what they're essentially telling you is, "What I'm about to share with you right now is sacred ground. I'm genuinely afraid in this moment, but I'm doing it anyway because it's you, and somehow you've become worth this risk to me." Maybe they're opening up about their childhood, their deepest fears and insecurities, past failures that still sting, or dreams they've never said out loud to another living person. The actual content matters less than the act itself, the choice they're consciously making in that exact moment. They're opening a door they typically keep welded shut, bolted, and heavily guarded. And they're doing it because somewhere beneath all their defense mechanisms and protective strategies, they trust you enough to handle whatever's waiting on the other side. This is vulnerability unfolding in slow motion. Vulnerability as a deliberate choice rather than some accidental slip of the tongue. For people with secure or anxious attachment styles, sharing personal details might feel completely natural, maybe even necessary for building any real connection. But for avoidant individuals, every single personal revelation feels like jumping out of a plane without a parachute. Every instinct in their body, every neural pathway reinforced over years of practice, is screaming at them to shut down, change the subject, crack a deflecting joke, or physically remove themselves from the situation entirely. But they push through all of that internal noise anyway, because whatever they feel for you has finally grown louder than their fear. When they tell you, I don't usually talk about this stuff, what they fundamentally mean underneath it all is, I'm choosing you over my own safety right now. I'm choosing connection over retreating into my fortress. I'm choosing to risk getting hurt because what I feel for you has become stronger than my instinct towards self-protection. This next one tends to confuse people more than almost anything else, and honestly, that confusion makes complete sense. On the surface, it sounds like a flat-out contradiction, the kind of mixed signal that can send anyone with anxious attachment absolutely spiraling. When someone with avoidant attachment tells you, I need some space but I still want to talk to you, it sounds like they're asking for two completely opposite things at once, and that contradiction often triggers real anxiety and insecurity in whoever's on the receiving end. But here's the thing, that apparent contradiction is actually the entire point, and understanding it is absolutely essential to recognizing what's genuinely happening beneath the surface. Avoidant people need space the way the rest of us need oxygen. It's not optional for them. It's not something they can simply negotiate away, and it is genuinely not personal, even when it feels deeply personal to you. When emotional intensity builds up inside a relationship, whether that intensity comes from conflict, growing intimacy, vulnerability, or even just sustained closeness over time, their nervous system goes into complete overdrive. This isn't some calculated choice or manipulation tactic on their part. It's a genuine physiological reaction. Their attachment system is quite literally wired at a neurological level to create distance the moment things start feeling too emotionally close, too vulnerable, too intimate. It's an automatic response, usually developed way back in childhood in situations where closeness was either inconsistently available or somehow felt threatening. But here's the absolutely critical part that reveals everything about their true feelings for you. When they add on that second half, but I still want to talk to you, or, but I don't want to lose you, or any variation of maintaining connection even while asking for distance, they're actively fighting against their own deeply ingrained programming. What they're essentially saying is, my brain and my entire nervous system are telling me to run far away and shut down completely, but my heart refuses to lose you. And that internal tug of war is something I'm genuinely trying to navigate right now. That second half, the but clause, is exactly where the real love lives and reveals itself. Because a typical avoidant response in most relationships would simply be silence, complete withdrawal, full ghost mode activated. They disappear entirely until the feelings settle down, until the intensity dropped to a manageable level, until their nervous system recalibrated enough to feel safe again. That's the pattern they've perfected and repeated, probably across multiple relationships throughout their life. So when they actually communicate their need for space while simultaneously expressing a genuine desire to stay connected to you specifically, they're doing something genuinely revolutionary for someone with their attachment style. They're trying to stay. They're actively attempting to make this work, despite everything their instincts are telling them to do instead. They're trying to balance their fundamental need for autonomy against their growing, intensifying feelings for you. What this seemingly contradictory statement actually translates to is, I'm genuinely scared of how much I care about you, but I care too much to just walk away the way I usually would. I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this entire relationship thing without completely losing myself or losing you in the process. When someone with avoidant attachment tells you, this is moving really fast, your first instinct might be pure panic. And honestly, that reaction makes sense, because it sounds like a warning sign for let's slow down, or maybe even, I think we should take a break, or worse, maybe we shouldn't keep seeing each other. But let's actually pause and decode what's genuinely happening beneath that statement, because the real meaning is far more layered and potentially far more encouraging than it first appears. For most people with secure attachment patterns, moving fast might mean becoming exclusive after only 3 dates, saying, I love you within the first month, moving in together after 3 months, or bringing up marriage within the first year. But for avoidant individuals, the definition of fast operates on an entirely different scale, on a completely separate timeline. For them, fast can mean anything involving emotional acceleration or increased vulnerability. texting every single day, making plans more than a week out, meeting each other's friends or family, having genuinely deep conversations about feelings or the future, spending several consecutive nights together, or honestly, even just consistently showing up and being reliably present in someone's life. Things that would feel completely normal, maybe even cautious or slow to someone with secure attachment, can feel like absolute warp speed to someone whose nervous system is wired to interpret intimacy as a threat. So when they say this is moving really fast, they're not necessarily hitting the brakes or looking for an exit. They're processing. They're noticing what's happening. They're becoming consciously aware that something significant is unfolding between the two of you, and that awareness alone is genuinely huge for someone who typically operates on autopilot when it comes to creating distance. The real key to understanding how they truly feel lies in watching what they actually do after making that statement, not just fixating on the words themselves. If they stick around despite voicing that concern, if they keep consistently showing up in your life, if they're still the one initiating contact and making future plans, if they keep gradually deepening vulnerability and intimacy even while verbally admitting it feels fast, that pattern of behavior is your real, honest answer. They're not running, they're not disappearing. They're not creating massive distance or ending things between you. They're simply narrating their internal experience out loud, giving voice to the fear and overwhelm they're genuinely feeling, possibly even quietly asking for reassurance that this is okay, that you're not going to hurt them in the end. What they're really communicating is something like, I'm feeling things I either haven't felt before or haven't felt in a very long time, and the intensity of it is overwhelming my usual coping mechanisms. I'm not entirely sure how to handle these emotions or this level of connection, but I'm here, I'm still present, I'm genuinely trying to work through this. That's an avoidant person's own version of saying, I'm falling in love with you, and it's completely overwhelming and terrifying, but I don't want to stop. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. This next phrase is pure self-protection wearing the disguise of brutal honesty, and it's loaded with layers of psychological meaning that most people either completely miss or badly misread. When someone with avoidant attachment tells you, I'm not good at this relationship stuff, it sounds on the surface like a disclaimer, like a warning label they're attaching directly to their own heart that says, don't expect too much from me. I'll probably let you down eventually, so go ahead and lower your expectations now to spare yourself future pain. But underneath that seemingly simple statement is actually a deeply vulnerable confession of insecurity, paired with a genuine, quiet plea for patience, understanding, and acceptance of their limitations. Avoidant people are often painfully, almost uncomfortably aware of their own behavioral patterns and past relational failures. They know they have a tendency to pull away the moment things get too intense or too intimate. They know they genuinely struggle with emotional expression and verbal affection. They know they sometimes need space in ways that don't make logical sense to whoever they're with. They know their relationship history is probably scattered with failed connections, people who eventually gave up on them, people they pushed away themselves, or situations they quietly sabotaged before they could get hurt first. So when they explicitly tell you, I'm not good at this, they're actually doing several complicated things all at once. First, they're being genuinely vulnerable about what they perceive as their own limitations and shortcomings, which is itself a significant act of trust for someone whose default setting is hiding weakness at all costs. Second, they're testing you in a very real, very quiet way. Will you run the moment I show you my flaws? Will you leave once you see I'm not perfect? Will you eventually use this against me somewhere down the line? They're essentially handing you an exit ramp, giving you permission to walk away now before things get more complicated, before feelings run deeper, before the disappointment they're sure is inevitable actually happens. And third, and this is genuinely the most important part, the part that reveals their true feelings most clearly, they're implicitly telling you, but I'm trying, specifically with you. I'm actually making an effort here. I wouldn't even be having this conversation. I wouldn't be in this situation at all if I didn't care. Because here's a fundamental truth about avoidant people that so many others simply don't understand. Avoidant individuals who genuinely don't care about someone don't bother entering defined relationships in the first place. They keep things casual. They keep everything undefined, ambiguous, loosely held. They avoid the whole situation entirely and simply vanish the moment things start becoming serious. So the very fact that they're here, actively in this relationship, talking about it, acknowledging their own struggles and limitations, and choosing to stay present despite their discomfort, that alone means they care enough to actually try to get this right. What they're essentially saying is, I genuinely don't know how to love you the way you probably deserve to be loved. I don't have the blueprint or the skill set or the emotional vocabulary for it yet, but I want to learn. I'm willing to try. Please be patient with me while I figure this out, because you're worth the discomfort that comes with growing. And now, saving what might genuinely be the most powerful one for last. Because when someone with avoidant attachment actually tells you, I miss you, and I'm not talking about some casual text or an offhand comment tossed out lightly, but a genuine, vulnerable, emotionally loaded moment of admission, you better believe that carries enormous weight and reveals depths of feeling they're usually terrified to acknowledge, even to themselves. Avoidant individuals generally don't admit to missing people. Their entire attachment strategy, this whole psychological framework they've built over an entire lifetime, is fundamentally centered around minimizing need, denying dependence, and convincing both themselves and everyone around them that they're completely fine being alone. Admitting that someone's absence creates an actual void, that another person's presence genuinely matters to their emotional state, that they experience longing or loneliness at all, that runs directly against everything their attachment system was specifically built to prevent. It contradicts the core narrative that has kept them feeling safe and in control their entire life. So when they push past all of that deep psychological resistance and actually tell you they miss you, they're admitting to a whole cluster of things they've spent their entire existence actively denying and guarding against. They're admitting they need you, at least on some level. They're admitting your presence genuinely matters to their emotional well-being. They're admitting that being alone isn't necessarily their preferred state anymore, that solitude has quietly lost some of its usual comfort and appeal. They're admitting real emotional dependence and attachment, the exact thing they've feared most their entire life, because dependence inevitably means vulnerability, and vulnerability inevitably means the potential for devastating pain. This isn't just casual affection or surface-level fondness. This is genuine need, real emotional reliance. And for someone with avoidant attachment, need is honestly one of the scariest words in the entire language. It means handing someone else real power over them. It means exposure and vulnerability. It means someone else's actions can genuinely impact their emotional state. It means the real possibility of abandonment, rejection, pain. It means they're no longer fully in control of their own emotional experience anymore. So when they push past all of that deeply rooted terror, past every single defense mechanism that has protected them for years, maybe even decades, and actually tell you they miss you, when they allow themselves to be that exposed, despite every instinct screaming at them to protect themselves instead, what they're truly communicating is, you've become so fundamentally important to me that I genuinely can't keep pretending otherwise anymore. I can't keep hiding behind independence or self-sufficiency or this illusion that I don't need anyone. I am genuinely attached to you, and that terrifies me on a level you probably can't fully understand, but it's the truth, and I need you to know it. That, right there, is love. That's an avoidant person allowing themselves to be truly seen fully and honestly, despite every protective instinct telling them to hide instead. That's them choosing you over their own fear, choosing real connection over safety, choosing to risk everything for the possibility of something real,